Hey, church, and welcome back to another lunch hour Bible study on how to read the Bible, a field guide for spotting Jesus in every book of the Bible. And today we are in the book of Acts. Don't forget that Acts goes along with the Gospel of Luke. We covered that, and we want to jump right in. So if you're in a group setting, this is a great time. Hey, hit pause in just a minute. And just talk about some of these questions. What do you know about the book of Acts? What happened? Who's in it? When did it happen? Talk about the book of Acts before you begin your group now. And welcome back. If you're watching online, we're going to go right on through it. Theme, hey, listen, you're not just waiting on a movement of God. You are a movement of God. I love that line. We say it a lot around here at Encounter, and it's so true. And the book of Acts just puts that super, super well. We actually did a message series on the book of Acts quite a few years ago now called Unstoppable, which is pretty powerful stuff. Acts chapter 1, it starts off, and we see the summary. We see everything we need to know about Acts in chapter 1, verse 8, where the author, probably Luke, says, in my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and teach. That's key. He says everything that he began to do and teach. So volume 1 is the book of Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus began. Volume 2 continues that in the Acts, what Jesus continued, right? So we've got the beginning, and then we've got the continuation on that, kind of part 2, the rest of the story. Same author, don't forget, Luke is traveling with his co-worker in the gospel, Paul. That's really important to kind of understand that, like, Luke was really significant writing Luke and Acts together, and he's not mentioned a lot because that wasn't really how people did it back in the day. But he's traveling along with Paul, which is why you get so much information in the gospel, so much information in Acts about what Paul was up to, because he was the guy that Luke was writing about. So it's just the two of them, right? And it's kind of faux pas to write about yourself. So who's he going to write about? Well, he's going to write about Paul, like, all the time. So Luke is traveling with Paul all the time, just about. And so that's how we know what Paul did. Traditional name is the Acts of the Apostles. Kind of a misnomer, because it's not really the Acts of the Apostles, because the only character throughout the entire thing is Jesus. Jesus is the one who appears in every chapter, including the first chapter. Okay, so we start off in introduction, just kind of cover maybe a little bit of the overview of the book. It's my hope that you leave this time together and you know what Acts was about, and then also why it's important for your week ahead. Acts chapter 1, Jesus promises his Spirit. It's going to come down, so stay in Jerusalem until you receive my Spirit, he says. He's making good, by giving his Spirit, making all these prophetic promises of God by rebuilding the temple, dwelling with his people, ruling and reigning forever. Hey, go back and watch some of those Old Testament videos that we did of those books. How many of them, right, referenced, like, listen, everything is crumbling down right now, but there's going to be a king, or there's going to be a prophet, or God is going to send his Messiah, his one, and the David line, Abraham line, this entire thing. And now Acts is saying, listen, he's making good on all of those promises. It's finally happening. And then Jesus gives his summary in Acts 1:8 when he says, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and the ends of the earth. These three kind of concentric circles as it kind of goes out and gets bigger. That's what's so important. That Jesus then, after he says that, he starts ascending back into heaven, and it says that he went into a cloud, or a cloud hid them from their sight. And it's just kind of fun to notice that that's a direct reference from Daniel chapter 7, where the Son of Man, the Messiah figure that's prophesied, ascends into the cloud in heaven. And it's kind of cool to see how, like, Old Testament, New Testament, how it all hangs together that way. So we have the introduction. Acts 2-7 is, remember, Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And so Acts 2-7 is, this is what happened in Jerusalem. It starts off with Pentecost. The Spirit comes. We've got these wind and flames announcing God's mighty deeds in foreign languages. This wasn't just a cool party trick, right? This is something that God was doing in order to come back all the way to the story that he began thousands of years ago and said, this is how it all ties together. Old Testament rooms, we got some references to the wind and fire. Guys, this is God's glory in the temple place. God used those images several times. You can check out Exodus 20, 2 Chronicles chapter 7, and you can start to see how these images weren't new to them. All right, God is reunifying all the tribes under the Messianic king, right? That's the importance of the language, where God is saying, listen, these tribes, these people, my Old Testament people, the Israelites, they're scattered everywhere across the whole planet. And now he's saying, I'm gathering up my people wherever they might be. And listen, whomever they might be as well. And that's going to be important because we're going to see that this is not a mono-ethnic movement of God in Acts. Very important. But of course, we already see in Jerusalem, there's this rise of persecution that starts to take place, resisting this message. You've got two problems going on in here, where the mission of God is going forward, the unstoppable church is moving forward, and there's two groups of people that are vehemently opposed to it. There's the Jewish people who are saying, no, this isn't right. He's not the fulfillment of all this. And then you have the Roman government, kind of the Roman overlords who say, listen, we consider this as a direct threat to our stability. You're talking about a king. You're talking about a kingdom. You're talking about a movement. You're talking about an entirely new way of life. And we don't like that either. Both groups start to stamp it out, right? But it has, by persecution, it has this paradoxical effect. That's a good word. Paradoxical effect. Rather than stamping it out, it spreads. How far? Real far, like the ends of the earth, far. Acts 7 ends with that stoning of Stephen and the people scattering, and they bring the hope that they have with them wherever they go. It's just such a cool picture. Probably a lot for us there too. When bad things happen, we tend to think like this is sort of the end, and for God, it's always just the beginning. Acts chapter 8, verse through 12. This is part 2 of 3, right? Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria now. The gospel is spread far enough to become a multi-ethnic international movement. Listen, spreading from Jerusalem to Samaria is a little bit like going to U.S. to Canada. So maybe international movement is a bit of an extreme, but that's kind of the direction that we're going. We see in Judea and Samaria, in this section, we see the foundation getting laid for this gospel really taking off and going to the ends of the earth. We start to see Paul, however you want to call him, his conversion, he went by Paul. We start to see him as an advocate for non-Jewish, for Greek Christians, right? That's going to be really important. It's also going to get him in some hot water. We see Peter talking to Cornelius, who was a Roman. We see the church in Antioch start to flourish. Listen, Antioch is one of the biggest cities in the world at the time. It was certainly the largest city in that part of the Roman Empire. Huge multi-ethnic church, right? We start to see these seeds developing about how this is a global movement. And we start to see the beginning of some foreign missionaries getting commissioned out, including Paul. Part 3, Acts 13 to 20, going to the ends of the earth. This is where we see the missionary journeys take place. Asia Minor, that's about modern-day Turkey. You can kind of think about it that way. First missionary journey there, then the second one and third one, they add Greece onto that. So Corinth, Ephesus, nope, that's in Turkey. Philippi, the Philippians, right? These are books that were written, letters that were written to the churches in Greece. So there's always a rhythm. Whenever Paul goes into a city, he always kind of has the same. He always kind of has the same model, the same rhythm that he uses. He goes into the synagogue and he establishes Jesus to be the Messiah. He establishes, listen, all of those Old Testament books. We're not setting them aside. No. We're in fact using those to point towards Jesus as the fulfillment of all of those. He's the Messiah of not just our people, though. He's the Messiah of the nations. That was real Paul's contribution. Of course, lots of people believe. Many people don't believe as well, but it does force that decision. I want to just say there's an intermission that takes place in here. Probably one of the most important chapters in the Bible for the church, besides the resurrection. And this is the Jerusalem Council in Acts chapter 15. Because all of this kind of came to blows in this big question here is how Jewish should Christians be? Remember, this is a movement, this is a religion, this is a faith that grew out of Judaism. So it's like, well, how Jewish should we be? Do we have to pay attention to all the festivals? Do we have to honor those? Do we have to dress like the Jewish people would dress? Do we have to speak that language? Do we have to get circumcised, right? I mean, this is some serious customs. There's a reason why this people group and this faith has persisted for such a long time. They have a strong sense of identity, and they have a question about how Jewish should Christians be. Now, Paul and Barnabas head to this council, and they have their answer, and they're like, nope, we are not a Jewish people. This is entirely new movement of God. That Jesus fulfilled all of those expectations, all of those rules, right? And so instead of latching onto those, what we're going to do is latch onto Him, onto Jesus. And they talked about it and they debated it for a long, long time. The conclusion was, listen, how Jewish should Christians be? That's not an important question. That this movement is going to be based on Jesus and His teachings, which tells us a lot about how to read the Old Testament, which is why this series is taking place. We read the Old Testament, we read through this series through the lens of Jesus and His teaching. We see everything through the lens of Jesus and His teaching, right? We care about the Old Testament because Jesus cared about the Old Testament, and He had a way of reading the Old Testament, and that's why we go back and do it that way too. Okay, but there's also this other clash where Paul is presenting Jesus as a king with a kingdom. And of course, Rome doesn't like that either, so they're losing friends left, right, and center. At the conclusion of the book, Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, ends of the earth, we see Paul take it to the ends of the earth, and Paul in Rome. He gets arrested in Jerusalem. He's put on trial with the Jewish leaders, and then Rome quickly gets involved. There's kings, there's governors, there's Felix, there's Agrippa, right? There's a lot of people, and Paul gets himself in prison. But listen, because it's such a non-violent movement, like that's the core of it, is to be peacemakers. There's not like a thing that they can hang a charge on Paul. So they just kind of like keep him in this bureaucratic prison for years and years. Rome kind of keeps him in limbo, and so he stays in prison. And listen, I love this, because if there's any hope for our week ahead, I think we can look at Paul's time in prison, his years in prison, and start to see this is the time when he wrote these apostolic letters, when he wrote to Colossae, Ephesus, Philippi, Philemon, right? The names of the cities of the books of the Bible that we have in the back of our Bibles. I love the power that Paul's greatest setback, his imprisoning, was really just a setup for God's greatest move yet, right? His time of most effective ministry is arguably the time when he wasn't allowed to leave his house or his prison cell, whatever that looked like. It's such an incredible move. And so I just want to encourage you to think about for a moment, like these setbacks that you have, and start thinking about them through the lens of the setup that God might be doing for your most effective ministry yet. That's what He did with Paul, and by the power of the Holy Spirit, that's what we believe He's going to do for you as well. Key verse is our structure of the book right here. You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and through the ends of the earth. Acts 1:8, the structure of the book of Acts. Don't forget to miss Jesus in the book of Acts, right? Obviously, you'll receive power when the Spirit comes on you. Very important. Power to bring that message to the ends of the earth, to be witnesses. That's what the power is for. I ripped this one from the series that we did on Unstoppable. I think it's on encounterchurch.org/messages a while ago. But the church is filled with liars, hypocrites, addicts, and sinners, like me, like all of us. Yet it's also God's unstoppable force for bringing heaven down to earth. The church is God's unstoppable force for bringing heaven down to earth. It will not diminish, not cease, not retreat, because it's not just a good idea. It's God's idea. And the best part of everything, you are the church. You get to be the witness. You are empowered to tell somebody today about Jesus. Awesome, guys. I got some reflection questions in here to talk about it, to take a minute, maybe by yourself, the rest of your lunchtime, and have a little devotional time with God. Also, if you're in a group setting, I'm going to leave the questions on the screen for just a moment. You can hit pause and talk about them together. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next week, Wednesday at noon.